Donald Trump's mugshot has been released after he was booked at an Atlanta jail on more than a dozen felony charges. This as part of a wide-ranging criminal case stemming from the former U.S. president's attempts to overturn his 2020 election defeat in Georgia. Trump spent not only about 20 minutes at the Fulton County Jail before heading back to his New Jersey golf club. Before leaving, he repeated his claim that the prosecution is politically motivated. Trump has now entered uncharted territory as the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges, even as he mounts another campaign for the White House next year. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Greece for a day-long visit. This is India's first prime ministerial visit to the nation in 40 years. Prime Minister Modi has met his Greek counterpart as well as the Greek president. The visit is expected to further deepen ties between the two nations. Prime Minister Modi has also laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier outside the Greek parliament in Athens. He is later due to have an interaction with the Indian community in Greece. Earlier, Modi was in Johannesburg, where he was attending the 15th BRICS Summit. In Japan, protesters gathered in front of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's official residence in Tokyo. This comes a day after the Fukushima nuclear plant started discharging treated water into the Pacific Ocean. Protesters held placards, chanted slogans and sang a protest song in unison to oppose the Fukushima water discharge. The radioactive water discharge has prompted China to announce an immediate blanket ban on all aquatic products from Japan. China says the Japanese government has not proved that the water is safe. Australia's defence minister has said that the country has a security interest in the South China Sea and will now work more closely with the Philippines on joint patrols. More than 2,000 Australians and Philippine defence personnel are participating in the amphibious landing and air assault drills. 2 Australian Navy vessels are conducting bilateral exercises with the Philippine Navy. The joint exercises are first for the two nations comes amid renewed tensions between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea. Chinese President Xi Jinping met African leaders on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. He said China would launch initiatives to support Africa's industrialization and agricultural modernization. Xi said that China will better harness its resources for cooperation with Africa. Beijing will support Africa in growing its manufacturing sector and realizing industrialization and economic diversification. Xi pledge was made as the BRICS summit wrapped up during a meeting with the African Union and 11 African countries. Earlier, BRICS members agreed to admit 6 new countries to the bloc, including Egypt and Ethiopia. Vladimir Putin has expressed his condolences over a plane crash that killed Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. The Russian president dubbed Prigozhin as a man of complicated fate. Meanwhile, the plane crash has raised many questions with few immediate answers. Washington is looking at a number of theories over what brought down the plane, including a surface-to-air missile. The U.S. Department of Defense has said there is currently no information to suggest a surface-to-air missile took down the jet presumed to be carrying Prigozhin. The Pentagon has announced that the U.S. will begin flight training for Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets in October. The training will begin after the pilots receive English language training next month. The flight training will take place in Arizona. Several pilots and dozens of aircraft maintenance crew will take the training, though no specific numbers were given. Earlier, Denmark and the Netherlands pledged to donate F-16s to Ukraine, and Ukraine fulfilling a long-standing wish by the government of Ukraine that it says will help strengthen its air defenses and its counteroffensive against Russia's invasion. And in a fresh development, Norway will donate US-made F-16 combat aircrafts to Ukraine, joining an effort led by the Netherlands and Denmark. The Norwegian Prime Minister made the announcement during a visit to Kyiv. He also announced donations of anti-aircraft missiles and other equipment, but did not mention how many F-16s would be given to Ukraine. F-16s have been on Ukraine's wish list for a long time because of their destructive power and global availability. The fighter jet is equipped with a 20mm cannon and can carry bombs, rockets and missiles. India's Chandrayaan-3 continues on its mission without any issues, and a mission update from the Indian Space Research Organisation. All activities are on schedule and all systems are normal. ISRO released a video recorded from its lander as it descended on the surface of the moon. The module's payload, called Ilsa, Ramba and Chast, were also turned on today. ISRO commenced rover mobility operations. Meanwhile, the shape payload on the propulsion module was also turned on. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Buenos Aires to demand more support from the government at a time of deepening economic crisis ahead of October's general election. Carrying flags and holding signs, protesters demanded more resources for social welfare programs and soup kitchens as families struggle with inflation that's been throwing more and more people into poverty. Argentina is grappling with annual inflation that now sits at 113%. JP Morgan estimates it could hit 190% by the end of the year. Amid protests that are continuing in Israel, as thousands marched on Thursday demanding women's rights in the wake of the government's highly contested judicial overhaul bill. The government's plan has plunged Israel into one of its worst political crises and sparked unprecedented protests at home and deep concern abroad. It has also sown divisions among the Israeli public and even within the military. Supporters of the legislation argue that it reinstates the balance of the government branches, while critics say that it removes checks and balances from government power. Costa Rican police have intercepted a boat carrying more than 2 tons of cocaine along the country's southern Pacific coast. A Coast Guard unit, along with the anti-drug police, detected the intercepted the submersible vessel about 200 kilometers off the southwestern coast. 3 people were detained in the operation and will be investigated for trafficking, manufacture and possession of narcotics. Costa Rican Security Minister said the drug shipment left Colombia for Costa Rica, possibly to be re-exported to Europe or the United States. A Jordanian woman has been raising turtles with passion and care for over 20 years in her family's home garden as part of her advocacy to protect the reptile creatures. Dr. Abir Bilbesi founded the Jordan Society of the Conservation of Turtles and Tortoise. With dozens of turtles crawling around, she has designed a special space for her pets. And Bilbesi's first encounter with a tortoise was when her father found one in their backyard, and since then she has been a supporter of them. London Zoo has held an annual weigh-in for its animals. The weigh-in is part of a week-long information gathering to monitor the health and well-being of over 400 species, from Sumatran tigers to terracotta sticks, insects, and the height and weight of almost every animal has been recorded by zookeepers, with some being coaxed onto scales with treats. A Mexican red-knee tarantula at the zoo weighed in 35 grams, while a male western lowland gorilla weighed 196 kilograms. Ahead of the world's largest beer festival, Germany's infamous Oktoberfest The official mug for the year 2023 has been unveiled. Typical Oktoberfest delicacies like beer, pretzels and gingerbread adorn the mug. This year, the mugs are already collector items before they have been used. The Oktoberfest is one of the biggest draws for tourists from all over the world. Hundreds of members of the different clans of the Maasai community gathered in Narok in Kenya this week to celebrate their culture and chart ways to preserve it. The event organizers said they wanted to hold the event at the same time as the great wild beast migration. This to attract tourists and highlight the indigenous conservation methods of the Maasai people. The 4-day festival began on Monday and displayed a wide range of performances from the Maasai people. As rapidly warming global temperatures are pushing Antarctica's sea ice to unprecedented low levels, this is threatening the very existence of one of the continent's most iconic species, the emperor penguins. 4 out of 5 emperor penguin colonies analyzed in the west of the Antarctic Peninsula saw no chicks survive last year as the area experienced an enormous loss of sea ice. One of the world's most potent symbols of global trade, the Panama Canal, is falling victim to climate change. As shrinking water levels force ships to part load in order to navigate the vital waterway. Vessels have been waiting almost 4 days on average at the waterway that creates a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And according to Clarkson Research Services, which is a unit of the world's largest shipbroker, and some ships have had delays of about 20 days. As wildfires continue to ravage Canada, an incredibly rare fire tornado over a lake in Canada has been captured on camera. It shows a giant vortex of flame swirling in the night sky in the area surrounding Gun Lake. Fire services have said that the fire whirl was recorded when a cold front passed through the province following several days of hot, dry weather. Firefighters continue to battle wildfires in Greece as well. The Greek Fire Service surveillance helicopter captured firefighting operations at Mount Parnitha. The fire of the mount has raged on for a second day in the largest forest adjoining the capital. The fires also threaten the safety of the national park. Hundreds of firefighters in Greece are struggling to tame deadly wildfires amid growing outrage over what critics say has been an inadequate response by the government. The U.S. Federal Reserve Jackson Hole Symposium in Wyoming is expected to kick off anytime now. There are strong expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve's chair will give clues about inflation and interest rate trajectory at the economic symposium. While it is not imperative for the Fed to speak in alignment with the market expectations, a hawkish surprise from the Fed could potentially upset the market. That's the big trigger for markets in the coming weeks. The Indian rupee opened marginally weaker against the dollar, tracking losses in its Asian peers ahead of the Jackson Hole speech of the Federal Reserve Chairman. Later in the day, traders are cautious as the dollar index surpassing the 104 mark could introduce an element of prudence for the rupee, which is trading close to 83 rupees per dollar. SoftBank, investor in the Indian food delivery aggregator Zato, is likely to sell its share through block deals soon, as the lock-in period for investors ends today. Before reports suggest these shares could be sold on bourses via block deals. That the implied value of the shares of Zomato, which SoftBank received via Blinkit, stood at 70 rupees per share, while Zomato's current scrip at 90 rupees a share implies a 30% profit for the Japanese investor.